Hey everyone, it's Joe from greenlightsound.com, and today we've got a look at a new plugin from brainworx and Plugin Alliance in partnership with Gallien-Krueger, the Gallien-Krueger 800RB Bass Amp Emulation. And this amp is unique in that it's got a bi-amp design with an adjustable crossover frequency, which allows you to amplify the low end and the high end independently. Or it can be used full range with a simple click of the switch right there, but kind of a unique design to push gain for the low end and the high end separately. If I open up the FX rack, we've got two separate recording chains with 64 impulse responses, which capture a variety of cabs, microphones, preamps for each side. So you've got a 100 watt amp side and the 300 watt amp side, each with its own separate recording chain if you want it. We've also got a bunch of effects here in the middle, which we'll cover in just a minute. So you can really dial in your sound with this. So to dive right into the controls, since there are a lot of them in this plugin, it's good to get right into it. The top level here is your basic amp side, the light gray. The first thing you see is a 10 dB pad. So if you've got really hot active electronics on your bass, you want to knock off some of that gain coming in, engage that 10 dB pad. The volume knob is your first gain stage here, the kind of the input level. You've got voicing filters, a low cut, a 200 hertz high pass filter. You've got a notch at 500 hertz with the mid contour here, and then a high boost at 1K, engaged again with these little switches down at the bottom. After that, we got some active EQ, pretty self-explanatory, 60 hertz, 250 hertz, 1K, and 4K, and you can add gain or attenuate if you'd like to kind of dial in the tone you want. The boost power level here applies gain to the post EQ signal after this, which increases overdrive and distortion. So if you really want to kind of push into the power amp side of things and get some distortion out of it, apply that boost. In our two different sides of our bi-amp design here, we've got a crossover selector, selecting between the 100 watt and 300 watt side, the low and high end of things, and then a master volume for each side of those. So you can dial in the master volume of the low end and the high end separately, or toggle it back to just full range. After that, we've got another master volume, but this main master control is applied to the combined output of these two, 100 watt and 300 watt master controls. So the basic gain stage goes left to right here. You've got your pad, your input volume here, a couple of filters and EQ options, a boost, and then you've got two more master controls which feed into the main master control right at the end. Now jumping down to the FX rack, we've got a basic noise gate here, on or off with this toggle switch, threshold and range controls. Threshold is when the gate opens. The range is how much gain reduction you want to happen while the gate is engaged. The amp filters are kind of unique here. We've got a toggle switch for off, pre, and post. The tight is the low end. If you go pre, that filters out the DI signal only, but not the amp signal or the virtual amp signal. If you would choose post, it's for the virtual amp as well, cutting out that low end, or you can have it off completely. Smooth is the top end again. You can slide it around to whatever frequency you want. Pre is the DI signal before this. Post would be this amp signal as well. Input gain here is best left at 0 for most sources, but if you've got a really weak pickups leading into this, you can boost the gain a bit. If you've got really hot active pickups, you can pull it down again. Then we've got a power soak here, which can reduce the volume of the power amp after it's been driven hard, which is different than a master control. So if you're kind of driving gain, driving this boost, getting a lot of gritty saturation out of it, the master control will change the tone a little bit. The power soak really won't. You can retain the feel of playing with that hard driven amp, retain the characteristic of the amp that way, but not really have the tone altered when you bring this down, just bringing the volume down. Then we've got our two recording chains right underneath. Again, this one's for the 100 watt side. This one's for the 300 watt side. If I click on this, there's a ton to choose from. 64, as I said, with a bunch of different cabs. If you're curious about how they recorded it, you can click this on for RC info. That's the recording chain info. It'll tell you the exact cab, the mic, the preamps that are on there. So this one is the Ampeg cab 4x10. Mic was the Shure Beta 52. And the 9098 AMEC preamp. Now if I chose a completely different one down here, an EV-RE20 mic, SSL 4000 as your preamp, and a Gallien-Krueger cab. So all different recording chains. These are kind of like recording ready to go out of the box. If you want to use your own impulse responses, you just click this switch right here. It'll turn off, do it for both sides. It'll turn off that recording chain. So no IRs at all, just this direct amp signal. You also have a phase invert switch for each side. And this horn control is pretty unique here. This is a separate impulse response that you engage there. This is from a Gallien-Krueger Paragon horn that gives attack to the tone. It's originally in the 2x10 cab from Gallien-Krueger, but this allows it to be added to any cab. So if you want to take just that horn sound from that one specific cab and apply it to a different cab, like one of the Ampeg cabs, for example, pop that horn in, gives that nice attack to the sound. If you click this auto button, this allows you, and you can choose the length you want, 1 bar here. It allows you to kind of cycle through the different IRs as you're playing. So one-handed playing, you can see it cycling through each one. There's 7, 8 comes next, 9 comes next, and that is all synced to your session tempo. So if you want to play a bass and kind of run your way through all these different cabs and find one that you like, instead of playing, grabbing the mouse, switching, playing, grabbing the mouse, switching, that allows you to do it without any hands. And you just stop it when you get to one you really like. So the next step is going to be to hear this thing in action. I've got a bunch of DI bass parts right here. We're going to start with our first one and just play this thing bypassed first so you can hear the DI signal all by itself. And engaged. Some really nice fullness right there on that part. If I pick just a different preset here, I'll go to 80s metal. It should be a lot more scooped. I'll bring the master volume down because this one's kind of hot. If you get rid of this mid contour, that 500 hertz nosiness really comes out. Add the high boost, opens up that top end, and you can really shape the EQ. Active EQ is really nice for dialing in the tone you want. Let's try it out on another bass part. So for this, I actually just picked a preset. It's number 7 preset, Funky Bass C. Here's the DI signal without the amp. And with our amp. I'll bypass on and off. That just gives it some of that bite. It doesn't change the DI signal a whole lot because that's a solid DI signal to begin with, but adding that kind of little bit of bite in the upper mid-range would really help cut through a mix. Next bass part here, I'll start with the amp bypassed. And engaged. And now as it plays, what I'm going to do is kind of cycle through the different recording chains that you've got here, first with the bottom end, then with the top end, and see how much of a difference that makes. Yeah, it can really dial in some different tones that way. Here's the next bass part, bypassed first. And engaged. It's really pushing that high mid out. Here's the next bass part, bypassed first. And with the plug-in engaged. We're going to play with the amp filtering here. I'm going to go to pre for our amp. So this is cutting out the DI bottom end. So because DI signals can sometimes be so strong in the low end, you can kind of cut some of that out and have the amp be taking care of that bottom end and not making it too overpowering. And of course, if it wasn't enough, you could push some of that 60 hertz in the active EQ to kind of make up for it without having that DI be overpowering. This next example, I'm going to play first without the amp engaged. It really needs a lot. You can hear it needs some nosiness to it. It just doesn't have any character to it, and this amp adds some nice character. Now, if you look at the master volumes here, I'll play with those. You can hear how you can adjust each end, the low end and the high end, to whatever you'd like. So if you want it kind of a more low end and less high end, or vice versa. And again, without. And with. Just really nice sounding, can really shape the tone. For this example, I'm going to try to really push this boost and get some overdrive out of it. So I'm just pushing up the volume on this first input gain stage here. I'm boosting that level a ton. I boosted each side of the master volume here and just put that power soak down to bring our volume down. Really get some nice fuzzy bass. Here's without. And with. Just experiment with putting that horn back in. So there it is, the new Bass Amp Emulation from Plug-in Alliance and Gallien-Krueger, the Gallien-Krueger 800RB. Really fantastic sounding. You can shape your bass tone a ton with this. So no matter what bass sound you have coming in, it has so many tone shaping possibilities. You can kind of achieve whatever bass tone you're looking for with this thing. So highly recommended. If you have any questions or comments, let me know in the comment section down below. Don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so already so we can keep you in the loop as to what's coming up next, and I'll see you in the next one.